We begin our show today with breaking news out of Japan. Former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died in the hospital after being shot at a campaign event in a nation where gun violence is so incredibly rare. A warning, while the following video is not graphic, some viewers may find it disturbing. Abe was giving a speech in Western Japan when shots were fired at him. The suspect, a man, was quickly tackled to the ground and arrested at the scene. The country's current prime minister called the shooting unforgivable. Let's go straight to local journalist Kaori and Joji, who joins us from Tokyo with the latest. Kaori, thanks for being with us this morning. First, just walk us through what we know right now. How did all of this unfold?
Well, Joe, the nation is in mourning and in shock that the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died from multiple gunshot wounds, we now know. He was in Western Japan in the city of Nara in broad daylight at around noon local time. He was giving a speech on behalf of a candidate that was running in local elections that are scheduled to be held here in Japan on Sunday. And as he was giving that speech, 2 gunshot wounds, according to eyewitnesses, were heard on the scene. He was then airlifted to a nearby hospital, and the physician who treated him at that hospital has spoken over the last hour or so, and he said that when the former prime minister arrived at the hospital, he did not have a heartbeat, and for hours they tried to resuscitate him, giving him what they described hundreds of milliliters of blood transfusions, but the physician said he saw 2 gunshot wounds around here, as he pointed to this area around his neck, that has pierced his heart, and they tried to stop the bleeding, but in the end, he bled out, and they confirmed that Shinzo Abe died at the age of 67 after a suspect who has been arrested shot reportedly 2 rounds during a regular routine speech in front of a train station in broad daylight in what is one of the most peaceful countries in the world. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, shootings like this are so incredibly rare in Japan with the country's zero-tolerance policy on gun ownership. As you mentioned, it's shocking to people there. It's shocking to people around the globe. Help us understand, how rare is gun violence in Japan, and what is some of the reaction on the ground there?
Well, the reaction is one of disbelief, and I think the Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, summed it up very, very well when he said that this is an unforgivable act of, quote, despicable barbarity, and I think that is the sentiment echoed throughout Japan today. You talk about the debate over gun control in the United States. That kind of debate is non-existent in this country. Technically, you are allowed to carry a gun. You can get a gun license, but it is so difficult to get that license. You hear that you were interviewed multiple times, your relatives are interviewed multiple times, and even if you were able to get a gun, to get ammunition for the gun is even more difficult as well. So I think this gun attack on a former prime minister is just so out of the blue to ordinary citizens. I think people are still having a difficult time just getting their heads around that.
Kaori, global leaders are echoing some of the sentiments we just heard there from the current prime minister. They're condemning the shooting and they're paying tribute to Abe. As Japan's longest-serving prime minister, what is his legacy? How is he going to be remembered, not just there, but really on the global stage?
Yep. Shinzo Abe, as you pointed out, is Japan's longest-serving prime minister. He held the premiership twice and for a total of nearly 8 years, and I think that is one of the biggest reasons why you're hearing this outpouring of sympathy from presidents and prime ministers all around the globe. But you also have to remember that his party, the Liberal Democratic Party, is a huge party that ideologically swings very widely from left to right. And make no mistake, Shinzo Abe was to the right of that spectrum. His hallmark and he wanted his own legacy to be revising the Japanese constitution, the pacifist constitution, to try and give the Japanese military, a stronger military, a more unapologetic Japan, in his words alone. I think will be his legacy. But I think on top of that, there was a period of what was known internationally as Abenomics, where he tried to revive Japan's economy to mixed results. And I think all of these things combined to a point where he had very troubled relationship with his neighbor, South Korea, in particular, because of his stance towards the Japanese constitution. But I also think people remember him very active actively courting the former U.S. President Donald Trump, planking him to golf and trying to avert a kind of trade war that erupted in previous eras between the U.S. and Japan. And I think there will be people who give him some degree of success for that. But I think at the end of his premiership, and he resigned nearly 2 years ago, he was faced with the COVID crisis. Remember, COVID broke out here with the Princess, the cruise ship, and he had mixed results in trying to contain that. But he was one of the first prime ministers to declare a state of emergency here in Japan, which was really unheard of until then. But he is from a political dynasty. His father was a foreign minister. His grandfather was a former prime minister. So needless to say, he was a blue blood politician. And as you're hearing from remarks from all around the world, and of course domestically as well, he was an iconic political figure, and his influence was felt, long after he left the prime minister's office nearly 2 years ago, Joe.
Kaori and Joji, thank you so much for joining us from Tokyo, where a nation is in mourning. We appreciate it. WNBA star Brittney Griner now faces up to 10 years in prison after pleading guilty to drug-related charges in a Moscow court. Greiner was arrested in February after authorities found vape canisters with cannabis oil in her luggage. Now pressure is growing for the Biden administration to do more to secure her release and bring her home. Let's bring in NBC News reporter Matt Bodner, who's been tracking this case from London. Matt, good morning to you. So walk us through exactly what happened yesterday. What are Greiner and what are her attorneys saying?
Joe, good morning. Well, yesterday we weren't really sure what to expect from the hearing, and I have to say it was, by Russian court standards, very short, about 2 hours. And we saw U.S. Embassy personnel enter the courtroom. That was different from her first hearing, so there was definitely more activity. And by the time she came out, we learned that she had admitted to guilt, that she was guilty on all charges, and her lawyers kind of clarified the situation later, saying that they were now counting on leniency from the Russian court. She, when she was admitting that she was guilty, she was insisting that she had no intent to commit a crime. So they're hoping, again, on leniency, recognition of her of the work she's done in Russia, kind of her goodwill efforts and such. So that's what they're banking on, at least officially right now. Of course, there appears to be a little bit of a political game going on behind the scenes as well.
I mean, Matt, this all comes just days after Greiner wrote a letter to President Biden asking for help. Then on Wednesday, the president reassured Greiner's wife that he was working to secure her release. What more do we know about those efforts?
So there's not too much to say about these efforts right now. Suffice it to say that the U.S. government does appear to be coming around to the idea of an exchange. We saw an exchange happen earlier this year with Trevor Reed. He was one of the other notable Americans. And that was interesting because throughout these cases, remember Paul Whelan, the first detainee, that happened in 2017. So everyone is known for a while kind of what's going on here. But the U.S. has only recently seemed to kind of come around to the idea that there might need to be trades to get these people out. So whatever is being said in these letters, we don't specifically know. Of course, there was Secretary of State Tony Blinken with a statement reassuring Greiner and her family, as well as Whelan's family, that they're doing everything they can to get them out. But at the end of the day, the Russian government has to want to trade with the United States. So they have to, if this is going to happen, they have to offer somebody up that the Russians really want. We, of course, hear all kinds of names all the time. But it really comes down to a political will on both sides.
So, Matt, what are you keeping an eye on for what happens next? And what could this guilty plea mean for Brittney?
Sure. So I think the important thing to always keep in mind with the Russian court process is it can be extremely lengthy, really tedious in the end. And also, you have a very low chance of ever beating any charge that is brought against you by the state. State almost always gets what it wants. So Greiner, by stepping up in this hearing and admitting guilt, I think is hoping to speed up this process to get to the point where the Russians will start talking about trades, because they have been very straightforward on that regard, saying they're not going to talk about anything until the court has reached a verdict. And if you fight these kinds of charges, you're just going to delay it. I've seen these cases go on for months with opposition figures, for example. So that seems to be what Greiner's legal team has decided to do here.
Matt Bodner knows this system well. Matt, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Now to Highland Park, Illinois, where days after Monday's mass shooting, the suspect's family is apologizing to those who lost loved ones. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa brings us the latest from the scene of the shooting.
Good morning from Highland Park. You can see 4 days later, the scene of the 4th of July massacre still closed off. That scene's still under investigation after 7 people here were killed. Dozens more were injured. And stories of survival and, frankly, of pure pain continue to pour out. Among them yesterday, we talked to a father and son who said they were here getting breakfast along this main street the morning of the shooting. When they heard the gunshots, they came running to help the injured. And they say they spotted what was clearly a child lying under a body. It turns out it was 2-year-old Aiden McCarthy, and they pulled little Aiden out from under the body of his father, Kevin, who was among the 7 killed. I asked if Aiden said anything.
He kept on saying, he does say a few words as he was saying shots, shots. And he would say mom shot, dad shot. And he just kept on saying that.
He was saying mom shot, dad shot.
He was. He kept on saying shots, shots. And we were talking to Kevin. We were saying, your son's going to be all right. Everything's all right. You're a hero. We just kept on talking to him pretty much to the end.
2-year-old Aiden McCarthy, now reportedly with his grandparents, also knew this morning the uncle of the suspect apologizing to the victims and to the people of Highland Park for what he says his nephew did, telling them that he couldn't believe it when he saw the news. He lived with his nephew, so he said he was really stunned when he saw his nephew's photo popping up on the news and heard the story of what had happened in his city. When asked if he had anything to say to his nephew, he simply responded, no. It's also worth noting today, the first funerals are scheduled. Among them, Jackie Sondheim, the preschool teacher who loved volunteering at her synagogue, and Nicholas Toledo. Back to you.
Maggie Vespa, thank you so much for that report. Breaking news this morning out of the White House. President Biden will sign an executive order aimed at protecting Americans' access to abortion after the Supreme Court's ruling to overturn Roe v. Wade. President Biden's actions will focus on safeguarding women's personal health information along with expanding access to federal-approved abortion medication. The move comes after the president faced mounting pressure from Democrats to take more action to secure abortion rights for women. President Biden is also expected to speak on the matter later this morning. In the battle against COVID, the Omicron BA.5 subvariant is now the most dominant strain in the U.S. The CDC says BA.5 was responsible for around 54% of the infections recorded last week. It comes as we're seeing a surge in case numbers and hospitalizations across the country. The daily average for new cases has crossed the 100,000 mark, and the daily average for new hospital admissions is now more than 5,000. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins us now for more on all this. Dr. Torres, so we know that this BA.5 variant is really behind the surge in the hospitalizations. What do we know? How is it spreading so quickly? How does it compare to the previous variants? And is it more serious as far as symptoms?
So there's a variety of things going on right now that's causing it to spread more quickly. And part of it's the virus itself. And what we know is, BA.5 has become the dominant. Originally it was 4 or 5, 2 different variants, but now it's separated where 5 is becoming the dominant. And that has to do with the spike protein and the wall and the mutations that are in that area of the coronavirus itself. But on top of that, what's happening around the world we're seeing is kind of the trifecta of events. Number one, we're having greater transmissibility. It can transmit from person to person. It's simply more contagious. It is better able to evade our immunity. So if you have a natural immunity, if you've had vaccines, it seems to be able to evade them to a certain extent. All of those vaccines in particular are still protecting you from serious illness and hospitalizations. And then the third part of that trifecta is the fewer mandates that we have out there, because people simply have gotten tired throughout the pandemic. They're not masking as much. I mean, if you go on an airplane, go anywhere, you see like hardly anybody wearing masks these days. And that is causing it to spread as well. And because of that, we're seeing more and more people getting it, not just here, but around the world. And as far as how more serious it is, we know it's more contagious. Anecdotally, we're hearing that people are having more serious symptoms at home. They're saying, I've been in bed for a day or two, but they're not getting hospitalized at nearly the rate they were at the beginning of the Omicron or during the Delta spread itself. And so that's part of the good news.
Which is the key, and the vaccines play an important role in that. So how effective have the vaccines been, and are they going to be modified to try and treat these new subvariants? And if so, when would we expect to see those changes to the vaccine?
So with the vaccine, it's been kind of the double-edged sword here. It's been good and bad. The bad part is it seems to not protect us from getting sick from Omicron, especially the BA.5, as much as we'd like. But the good part of it is it's protecting us from serious illness, hospitalizations, and death, which at the end of the day, that's what we really want it to do. And what we're seeing in the deaths are typically those who are elderly with compromised immune systems, or those that are unvaccinated seem to be dying at a higher rate than those that are vaccinated. But as far as what's going to happen in the fall, the FDA has advised manufacturers to make a bivalent vaccine that's going to have 2 different variants in it. The original which is the original strain back 2 years ago, and then the BA.4/5, which is the one they think will happen in the fall and still be the dominant one. So they're taking a bit of a gamble on that one, but hopefully it works.
I'm going to read off a few countries here that are seeing some really significant rises: Greece, Spain, France, Germany, the Caribbean islands, Morocco. So if you're planning to go there anytime soon, should you change your plans, or then how do you prepare if you are going to those places to be as safe as possible?
And the answer I'm going to give is it depends. So if you have people, or if you yourself are immunocompromised or have high-risk medical issues, then yes, you probably want to change your plans. But for everybody else, I say go ahead and go with your plans. But one thing to remember, the mask. Again, none of us really like it all that much, but it is something that is really helpful. We know that unilateral transmission is blocked by the mask, so if I wear one but nobody else around me is wearing one, I am protected. And so it's something you want to do. Not the most convenient thing, but one of the most powerful things we have right now.
I'm surprised how few people I see wearing masks right now, even here in New York. So
and of course, get vaccinated
as
well.
There you go. Good advice as always. Dr. John, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. The UK is dealing with the fallout from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's dramatic resignation. The Conservative Party leader announced he would be stepping down after a series of scandals led to more than 50 members of the government quitting, including some top cabinet ministers. NBC News contributor and Sky News anchor Wilfred Frost joins us now with more on this. Good to have you with us. So Johnson says he's going to remain in power until his successor is named, but many say he should step down right away. So what happens next, and is there any way he could be forced out sooner?
Well, I mean, Joe, there's not obviously tons of examples of when a prime minister's forced out in the middle of their parliamentary term. But in fact, when it does happen, the norm is that they stay in place until their successor is chosen. That's what happened, for example, when Boris Johnson took over from Theresa May in the summer of 2019. She was in place during the leadership process that picked Boris Johnson. Of course, anything is possible in British politics right now, but what's likely is it'll be about an 8-week process. It's 2 stages. Stage 1 will take about 2 weeks, where the 358 Conservative MPs will narrow the list of runners down to a final 2, probably from an initial about 10. And then those 2 will tour the country over the following 6 weeks until the 200,000 strong Conservative Party membership base makes the final choice. So it's not a vote of the entire country. It's not a general election, and we should get the successor in about 2 months' time.
So that's the how of how this would work. Now, another big question is the who. We just saw some names on the screen a few minutes ago. Some people have already thrown their name in the hat in the race to succeed Johnson. Are there any favorites right now at this early stage?
The betting markets give Ben Wallace, the defense secretary, and Rishi Sunak, the former finance minister, until Monday, when he resigned, a bit of a slight lead in terms of being favorites at this stage. But really, it's an incredibly open race, and any of those names on the screen have a good chance. Why is it so open? Because it's not an issue-based leadership election like it would typically be when these sorts of oustings happened. For example, again, when Boris Johnson took over from Theresa May, it was because the Conservative Party wanted a harder Brexit. They wanted a clearer Brexit, and Boris Johnson was the obvious person to represent this. This has been more about sort of ousting Boris Johnson for his personal issues, almost at any cost, and worrying about what comes next later. And we're now at that stage, and they're going to decide, the party, what indeed comes next.
So to put it mildly, Boris Johnson was a highly polarizing figure in UK politics, frequently overshadowed by controversies, by scandals. So overall, what is the legacy he leaves behind, and how significant was his time in office?
Well, I think, Joe, comfortably the most significant thing was that he did deliver Brexit after, of course, it had met quite a few obstacles and been delayed multiple times after the initial vote to leave in the EU referendum back in 2016. The other very significant part of his legacy is taking a tough line on Russia very early during the war in Ukraine and maintaining that throughout. And clearly, the reciprocal support for Ukraine has been clear, a very loud voice within continental Europe on that issue. But the bottom line really is he's going to be one of the shortest serving prime ministers in modern times, a little bit shorter than Theresa May, a little bit longer than Gordon Brown, and failing really to deliver that much, particularly domestically, despite a massive majority that he earned in 2019. And it was illuminating, I thought, in his resignation speech that he did point quite a few times to the size of that electoral victory in December 2019, which perhaps he didn't realize also kind of implied he didn't have too much to talk about since then.
Wilfred Frost, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Now a little closer to home, parts of the country could see some strong storms this weekend. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with your morning news now weather. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, Joe. Great to see you. And yeah, we're going to see storms this weekend. We're also seeing really dangerous temperatures. So that's what we're following as we go throughout today into the weekend. Today, 57 million Americans under some sort of heat alert, whether it's a heat advisory or an excessive heat warning. Where you see the pink, that is your excessive heat warning. So Nashville, Little Rock, down to Dallas, we're looking at temperatures into the upper 90s, triple digits. Where you see the orange, that is your heat advisory. And this will last through Sunday. So temperatures today into the triple digits for some. 101 in Tulsa. It's going to feel like 109. Little Rock, 102, feeling like 112 today. It's going to feel like 108 in Dallas, and will feel like 109 in Houston. So we have the high heat, we have the high humidity. You combine that, and that's where we're looking at that feels like temperature. Tomorrow, no relief from the heat. We're looking at temperatures once again climbing into the triple digits. Dallas, 104, feeling like 107. It will feel like 110 in Little Rock. And then that heat's going to slide to the east as we head throughout the later part of the weekend into early next week. So by Tuesday, New York City into the low 90s. Richmond, 91 on Tuesday, 91 also in Charlotte. Cincinnati, you're going to be into the 90s by Monday. Now, this heat, the humidity is so dry in Texas. 9 months ago, we were at less than 1% of Texas was in a drought. But look what happened as we look towards today. We're looking at 86% of Texas is in a drought. That's a really dangerous situation. And we're looking at 46% of that in extreme drought. So we're adding to that as we go day by day. It's been so dry and so hot. We continue to add the heat there. And we're going to see that heat throughout the next couple of days. We have that area of high pressure that's fueling those storms. It's fueling the heat. And we're seeing storms kind of ride along that high pressure. So we're seeing that in the Central Plains into the Ohio Valley. And that's what we're going to watch today in terms of any severe weather. We're looking at the threat for some gusty winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. Could see some damaging hail as well, and the chance of a few tornadoes. So once again, Montana, you could see some severe weather into parts of North Dakota as well. 7 million at risk, kind of honing in here on parts of the Ohio Valley, Lexington, Louisville, Evansville, Bowling Green. You could see the chance of some strong to severe storms today. Joe?
Weekend for some folks around the country. Thanks, Michelle. We'll see you next hour.
Sure.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.